Okay, I know. I shouldn't talk about politics. I know I shouldn't. I'm going to piss someone off no matter what I say, but I'm going to anyway because it's work related. It's important. So Mike Bloomberg yesterday sends out this tweet. He says, as president, I'll turn the East Room into an open office plan where I'll sit with our team. I'll use the Oval Office for some official functions, never for tweeting, but the rest of the time I'll be where the leader should be, with the team. I mean, listen, look at that photo. Like, does that look like the very definition of hell for anyone else? Like, oh my god, if I walked into any office environment and saw it look like that, I think my head literally exploded at this tweet. Okay, like, never mind seeing it in real life. I don't need to see that. And listen, I'm gonna give Mike Bloomberg a couple of points here. I am, because I do think there's something to be said about the leader sitting with the team, being with the team, spending time with the team. However, when we are talking about the leader of the free world, I'm gonna be honest. Like, I want him in his own office. I want him away, and I want the team as much as possible to have their own offices as well. Why? Because open office environments are horrible. They are horrible for morale. They're horrible for productivity. Some places argue that it impairs diversity. We'll talk about that one in a second. But they're just, generally speaking, a bad idea. And I'm going to tell you why. We're going to look at a couple different articles. This one's from Entrepreneur. Why open office plans are bad news for employees. Employees in such spaces spend less time in face-to-face interactions, making teams less collaborative and productive. Over the years, companies have believed open offices are an architectural gift that helps save money on real estate and spurs interaction among employees, thereby promoting more collaboration on tasks, But here's an open secret. Open offices just do not work. Research shows that such offices result in 73% less face-to-face interactions and a 67% increase in email interactions. Why? All the distracting noise of an open office causes employees to tune out with their headphones, and they resort to sending their queries to colleagues via email instead of standing in front of them, owning to a lack of privacy. The results, consistent with the fundamental human desire for privacy and prior evidence that privacy may increase productivity, when office architecture makes everyone more observable or transparent, it can dampen face-to-face interactions as employees find other strategies to preserve their privacy. For example, by choosing a different channel through which to communicate. Rather than have a face-to-face interaction in front of a large audience of peers, employees might look around and see that a particular person is at his or her desk and send an email. Don't tell me you've never done it. You've done it. You know you have. The impact of the open office workspace on human collaboration. This is from a study called "The Impact of the Open Office Workspace on Human Collaboration." A more recent study by people with names, I'm sorry, I'm horrible at pronouncing names, that I'm not even going to try to pronounce, which focuses on 456 employees in 20 regional offices around the U.S., found that they themselves didn't like working in such a space. The study, which was published in November, I think this article is a couple of years old. Oh, no, well, I mean, it's relatively old. November 2018, found that working in open office plans limits the experience of privacy and intensifies the perception of intrusion among employees, in this case, architects and designers. Earlier studies have shown that open offices actually make employees miserable. A study by furniture company Steelcase, which included 10,000 workers, found that 95% of respondents said that working privately was important to them, but only 41% that they could do so. It's understandable, since almost 90 minutes in a day are lost because of distraction. I'm going to say that again. 90 minutes a day are lost because of distraction in these open office plans. But that's not the only one I have. I've got some other evidence too. Here's another article from June 2019. Open office plans kill productivity. Here's what to do instead. Now, this one I have a tiny a teeny tiny little issue with their recommendation. But let's look at what they found. Participants found 70% fewer face-to-face interactions, 56% more emails in open office plans. Now, here's why this is a bad thing, and this is really, really important to understand. When we see a decrease in face-to-face interaction and an increase in email and electronic communication, you are just setting yourself up for a lot of interpersonal problems in the workplace because you're removing things from the equation like tone of voice or facial expression. People can't intuit those things when they're coming over electronic communication. And so think about it this way. Think about a time when you got up on the wrong side of the bed. You came into work, you were in a bad mood. And the first thing that happens is you get this email, maybe it was a really short email to the point from a coworker, and it just says, "I'm going to be 5 minutes late, please start the meeting without me." If you're in a really bad mood, it is very easy to read into that email that person is being rude and take it in a negative way. Now, some people argue that intent doesn't matter. I think intent always matters, and I suspect the intent of the person sending that email was not bad. It was just to say, "Hey, I'm running a little late, get started without me." But when you come in and you don't have these other attributes like tone of voice or facial expression to be able to look to for guidance on what the person means, you're going to default to assuming the worst possible thing. I have seen more negative interpersonal conflict over stupid emails that people send, like, "Why didn't you put a smiley face at the end of that email?" And then it creates this conflict that goes on for months and months and months over a flippin' email, guys. So we want more face-to-face interactions. This is something, if you watch my Playing Politics talk, it's on this channel. Go ahead and take a look at it. I always emphasize, get up out of your chair, go talk to people. Get up out of your chair, go talk to people. Get up out of your chair and go talk to people, because you are going to alleviate so much unnecessary nonsense in the process of doing so. Let's see. What else does this article have to say? Bloom divided a group of 500 employees into two groups, a control group, and this is where they're starting to make the argument for remote work. So this article's solution to this is, listen, if you don't have the office space, like, let them work from home. I actually think that's a pretty valid thing to say. Remote work has come a long, long way in recent years. People tend to feel they're much more productive when they're working at home and they don't have this distraction. They have quiet time. They're more comfortable. And so what they're seeing here is the study showed a number of benefits in favor of a remote setting. Home workers saw an increase of 13% increase in performance and improved job satisfaction. Even more impressive, their attrition was cut in half. So I think that remote work is actually a really great way to go about it if you're struggling with office space. It's definitely far superior to doing that. Oh my God, that is, again, like, it's a nightmare. I can't even. But I'm gonna dock this article just a little bit, because they said to make people feel more comfortable, just know, like, thankfully you don't have to play the guessing game when it comes to your team's productivity. What they're saying is, if people are working from home, well, how do I know they're actually working? How do I know they're not just, like, watching TV all day and eating bonbons or whatever people do? Listen, you have to trust the people you hire. You have to trust the people you hire. If you don't trust them, then why are you hiring them in the first place? And this article is basically saying, listen, you don't have to trust that your team's working. You can monitor them. You can put time tracking software like Time Doctor that keeps a watchful eye on your employees from afar. This software monitors workplace activity by time tracking, taking screenshots of employees' computers, and providing analytics on potential poor time uses. I'm sorry, is there any bigger red flag to send your employees that you don't trust them than taking random screenshots of what's going on? And who's reviewing all those screenshots? Who even has time for this? Is that like someone's full-time job to spy on what is going on employee screen? So don't do that. Please don't do that. You are sending such a clear message that you don't trust your people. Trust is foundational, and especially if you're going to be creating remote workplaces, you have to start with trust. Default to trust until someone shows you otherwise. always. I know you're scared that they're not working, but people want to work. People want to do a good job. They want to meet their goals. And if you're meeting with them regularly, which can occur on video, just like this, it's just as good as in-person meetings, and you're having those conversations, this should not be a problem. Here's another article right here. Open offices are bad for productivity. In this one, researchers surveyed over 1,200 senior executives and non-executive employees about their workplace arrangements. While 53% of employees reported feeling less satisfied and less productive when they had work to do through ambient noise, only 35% of executives felt that way. So what they're saying here is that executives don't have a problem. By and large, I mean, most of them, 65% of them with open offices, they are able to manage it much better. If you are an executive and you're thinking about this for your team, understand that you have to set them up for success. It's your job to set them up for success. They might not have the same perceptions as you do about the quality of these open office spaces. The disconnect between the perceptions of management and the people they employ were evident in other areas as well. Just 41% of employees said they have the necessary tools to filter out distractions, while 63% of executives felt like employees had everything they needed. Again, there is a disconnect between the executive perception and the employee perception. And if you want your team to be able to produce their best end result, you have to bring that gap closer together. More information, 52% of employees describe work-life balance as being very important to them. Work-life balance is much easier to maintain when you're at home. I mean, in some respects, there are other things too that sometimes employees tend to work really long hours when they're working at home because they forget what time it is. Sometimes they forget to eat. I know I work from home anytime I'm not traveling, and there are days where it's almost 3:00 right now. I don't think I've eaten yet today because I sat down to go to work and forgot. So there are other problems too. But by and large, if you don't have to do that commute, you don't have to sit in traffic or take public transportation, you're adding more hours to your day, and it does get easier to maintain that work-life balance. But again, we see this disconnect. When employers were asked about the same question for their team, only 34% executives said that balance was a priority for their employees. Maybe the article should say only 34% of executives said that balance was a priority for them. Let's see. These discrepancies aren't too surprising when you compare the work-life balance of an executive to that of a lower-level employee. The study reveals that a majority of executives are equipped with tools to make it easy to do their jobs outside of the office, while less than half of their employees can say the same. The most dramatic difference between the two groups is their physical workspace. 62% of top-level workers have a private office, a privilege granted to just 14% of employees. Well, what do you know? Listen, I have to give Mike Bloomberg props because he's saying what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If you're working in an open office space, I'm working there with you. If he was just, he is currently a CEO of a company, but if he was just like your average CEO and not running for president, I would say bravo. Bravo, good sir. That's what you should be doing. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. I don't necessarily have problems with executives having separate offices. They need to have meetings. They need to have private phone calls, all that sort of thing. But there is something to be said with sitting with the team. Now, when you're the president and you're responsible for running the country, that, you need your space. And I don't necessarily want you gallivanting around with the employees, but just as an average executive, that's fine. Here's one last article I want to show you just because I thought it was kind of funny how open office plans kill diversity and equality. And this is one where I'm gonna take a little bit of an issue with this article for so many reasons. And I'm gonna he gives all the employee it's bad, all this stuff. Let's see. There's a specific quote I'm looking for here. Oh, here it is. One well-documented fact of open plans offices is that constant visibility puts women at a disadvantage by forcing them to spend extra energy focusing on their physical appearance. I'm sorry. What? I mean, come on, man. And he goes on to say, however, it's not just women who suffer from being forced into a fishbowl. Open plan environments also put at a disadvantage those employees who are overweight, disabled, or in any way fail to conform to the American standards of conventional attractiveness, i.e. young, thin, light-skinned. No. No, 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 no. Now, I can understand how people would feel uncomfortable in more open office environments, but at the end of the day, you have to take responsibility for yourself. I don't want to diminish that people might feel uncomfortable in those environments. However, it is not your office's job to help you feel comfortable with the way you are physically presenting. It is not your boss's job. It is not your CEO's job. It is not your HR office's job. You have to become comfortable with yourself. You have to become comfortable with what you're putting forward. And I can understand why people might want to be mindful of this. And I think, I guess mindfulness is never a bad thing. But if a woman is uncomfortable with her appearance and feels like she's putting too much energy into it, I would argue that she needs to do some inner work to really learn to accept herself more and become more confident and let go of the baggage that she's probably been carrying around for a really long time. I would say that as someone overweight or disabled or anyone who feels self-conscious about how they look, that's your responsibility. That's your baggage to clean up. And believe me, most people have that baggage. But do I think that making people feel uncomfortable with how they're viewed physically is a direct result of the open office floor plan? Probably not. Probably not. This article goes on to say, for example, open offices are vehemently opposed or vehemently hostile to older workers, Gen X and above. I'm so glad they mentioned Gen X in this article, because Gen X is always forgotten. In every article, it's like boomers and millennials are now boomers and Gen Z. Like, Gen X are always forgotten. So at least it's mentioning them, although it's calling them old, so that might not be good. Because of one age, it becomes increasingly difficult to achieve the cultural standard of conventional attractiveness. I'm sorry, like, what? Like, I mean, work, I guess for a lot of people, work is your dating pool, but that is also just rife for errors. If we're spending so much time on how we're looking and how people perceive how we're looking, and I'm never going to be able to get ahead if I don't look just the right way. Come on, guys, it's all BS. It's all BS. It's all BS. We can all identify women who do not present the standard, the physical standard of beauty that we might consider to be, ideal. We can always identify women who have achieved great things, even if they didn't have that physical standard of beauty. We can identify people who have gone on to great success when they're overweight or when they're disabled. These things are only a hindrance when you allow them to be a hindrance. They are only a hindrance when you buy into it. And so if you say, you know what, I'm not going to play this game, I'm going to show up, I'm going to be myself, I'm going to say what I want, I'm going to do what I want, you are going to bring people onto your team, because people like confidence. People like people to come in and just own who they are and be comfortable with who they are. When you're comfortable with yourself, you make other people more comfortable with you. And listen, I'm not going to front. This is a really long process for a lot of people to go through. It involves letting go of a lot of baggage that's come from our childhood and our parents and everyone that's ever hurt us and everyone that's ever broken our heart and all these things. And I don't want to diminish this. This is not as easy as snapping your finger and saying, okay, I'm confident now. But can you do it? Yes. And I guess the reason I'm so annoyed at this article is that it tells you that you can't. It says you are a victim. You are a victim of this open office environment. There is nothing I detest more than people who instill a victim mentality among other people, because you chose to be there. You chose to work there. You could go get another job. You could go do lots of things, but you have all the power and all the ability you need. You don't need someone else's permission to do it, but you do need to give it to yourself. So don't buy into any of these things. I'm sure there are more legitimate arguments to make about open offices and diversity, and so my neighbor is now banging on the wall, so I'm going to wrap this video up. And if you have other resources for arguments to make about how this might impair diversity, I would legitimately like to see it. I think that diversity and inclusion are important things to think about. I just don't think that the open office is the great killer of diversity and inclusion. There are lots of other things organizations do that do not help with diversity and inclusion. But I guess just to wrap this up, listen, like, no one wants to work in an office like that, Mike Bloomberg. No one wants you looking over their shoulder, dude, especially when you're the president. It's not always appropriate, and organizations really should be looking for other alternatives in general to the open office floor plan, because it just is not good for you. It's going to really impair the success of your team, especially if it looks like that. Oh my God. Again, my very definition of a nightmare right there.